Oh, I want to ask you a question though.
Oh, oh,
Should we mention that you've had a baby, or would you rather not have that be in
we
the
could
podcast?
mention that. That's fine. Yeah, all right. So, hello, Internet, and welcome to another scintillating tale on Never Stay Dead. I'm Matthew Dergish, and I'm here with my co host.
Damian, Sleepy Reader, 666.
All right.
Last name withheld. I don't know why I do that, but I'm in the habit of withholding my last name.
Probably smart. We're here today to talk about the Wildstorm classic Sleeper.
Right, which was this the first teaming up of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, who are now beloved by many a comic book fan?
Yeah, this is where they found each other and started their careers together, and they've been pretty inseparable since.
And what we've covered essentially is 24 issues, season 1 and season 2. I
Uh,
don't think they'll ever return to this because it's owned by Wildstorm, I assume.
right. Yeah, this was 12 issues. That was two 6-issue minis.
Were
And
they? Oh, I thought they were all a 12-issue series and then another 12-issue series.
am I misunderstanding?
The way I
Oh,
consumed them, which was on a combination of Hulu and the DC Universe app, was they presented to me as Sleeper Season 1 and Sleeper Season 2, and each was 12 issues. And
yes, you are
you
right.
have 4 6-issue paperbacks
Right.
that you
So you
have.
think I'd be able to tell that right out the gate, and I just miscounted. So,
Well, you had 6 in your head because you read them in chunks of 6, and I read them presented as
honest,
chunks of 12.
honestly, I read 4 trades, and
It was
I
all
was
one.
looking at something that said 12 issues, and I just took it for granted. I didn't think about it. So yeah, all right, two seasons and a whole pile of issues and a whole lot of confusion. And what made it even more confusing for me were these were a lot of smaller players in other books. At some Wildstorm stuff I've read and haven't read, which
Right.
made this a muddled read.
Right. The mastermind behind all of this was Lynch. I forget his first name now. John Lynch. And
Yes, John Lynch.
and I know that I've seen him in some other Wildstorm books. And Grifter, of course, I am vaguely familiar with. And actually, I've read more Grifter in the New 52, I think, from DC than in the original Wildstorm. But I certainly remember seeing Grifter around. And I bring up Grifter because in my edition of Sleeper Book 1, they include 5 or 6 issues from another miniseries called Point Blank, which is stolen from a famous film noir kind of movie, I think, or an action film, 70s action cop flick, I think. Anyway, there was a series called Point Blank that actually involved all these characters already. So I think at some point I need to sort of say what I read there. Plunge in with that Point Blank stuff.
Starting with the point blank stuff, I think makes sense. Just before that, I just do want to say, when I was reading through, like I said, I didn't realize at first this actually tied into everything, which made this a bit more
Mm-hmm.
muddled. With a bit of revisiting and looking into it after the fact, realizing that this really played in between the margins of a lot of Wildstorm stuff I read, and
Right.
it's a hard read because it assumes you know a lot more than you know. In particular, there was points out of this point blank that it assumed you knew that I certainly didn't. And talking to you a bit about it beforehand made me realize there's some stuff that I thought was part of the mystery that you're really already supposed to know.
Huh. Well, I guess it gets played both ways since a lot of people now read this separate, right? These are in print while probably a lot of the other material they tie into might not be.
That's true.
But yeah, so I was not able to know what I should have known before if I was a hardcore Wildstorm reader or not. But I'm guessing that we are having all this presented to us in a new way. So I think overall, the first thing we can say about all of this is it's done in an extreme film noir shadowy nighttime bars and alleyways kind of mode. We pretty much never leave that world of just sort of the underbelly of the city kind of feel.
Right. It's all dark ops and shady bars and back alleys. You're right.
And that's kind of a thing that this creative team has continued to be known for afterwards. A lot of what they do plays on film noir and the underbelly of society, especially their criminal series. But
Yeah, in different ways though, and I think the comparisons are interesting. We'll get into it a little more. I feel
yeah,
like they got better as they went.
I totally agree. But to me, this was fascinating because I am very familiar with what they're doing now, and to see what they were doing, when was this? 20 years ago, roughly,
Yeah.
is interesting. But so, well, it really is all about circular plots, which is perhaps another reason why we're stumbling over this a little bit. You don't so much get to point A as point B as you keep returning to where you started, at least till the very end, where you end up in a somewhat different situation that still is kind of like the snake eating its own tail kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But our major players are this guy named Holden Carver, who's the sleeper agent, who's gone into the organization of the criminal mastermind Tao, who was once a superhero. And I don't know if some people would have known that sooner than I did. Perhaps that's the kind of...
Depending how involved you were with Wildstorm,
Right.
he seemed to have more of a play in Gen 13.
Right. And I don't know if he's been used as a villain before or was just a superhero who disappeared and now suddenly we're having him as sort of the major crypto villain of the world, in a sense, the hidden villain of the world. But so we got Holden Carver going in as a sleeper agent, sent in by the mastermind, I guess, of what's it called? Something Ops.
Right.
International Operations, IO, they normally just call it. So John Lynch controls IO and has sent and manipulated Holden Carver into the position of being a sleeper. And it's really, in a way, a three-way story with those three people, with Holden Carver bouncing back and forth between the two. But then we have this prequel, or not really a prequel, it was literally came first, this story Point Blank, which was all from the point of Grifter, who finds that his buddy, John Lynch, the manipulator from IO, has been shot, nearly killed, and is in a coma, and he tries to solve the mystery of who shot him. And in doing so, he slowly encounters Tao and Holden Carver, who's working for Tao. There's a point at which Holden Carver is supposed to kill Grifter, and instead he fakes Grifter escaping and has Grifter shoot him. And at that point, I don't think Ed Brubaker knew that Carver couldn't feel pain, because there's discussion about how he will feel pain there. So I don't think he made up Carver's powers, unless Carver comes from elsewhere in Wildstorm and already has.
He does.
Okay. Well, there was some sloppiness in the writing there. So,
Well, it might have not been the case yet.
so I'm spoiling Point Blank for you. We're going to have to spoil all of this to discuss it, as much as it's worth considering spoiling. But
Well, yeah.
so the only real appearance in this story, Point Blank, of Holden Carver is when he lets Grifter go, and then Grifter eventually finds out that Tao hypnotized Grifter to kill John Lynch. So he was his own, he is the criminal that he is searching for. He's the killer, or the would-be killer that he's searching for. And then he confronts Tao, and Tao hypnotizes him again. They don't call it hypnotism. They have some fancier description of how he gets into your mind and turns your emotions in on themselves. But essentially,
Yeah, it's a bit more sci-fi, right? It's
right.
not quite the...
But
yeah.
that doesn't seem like enough, because he literally wipes Grifter's memories. And Grifter is the only one, because Lynch is in a coma, Grifter was the only one now who knew that Holden Carver was not really a villain, but was a sleeper agent. And when Tao who does not know Grifter knows this, but Tao erases all his memories of his investigation. So Grifter doesn't remember what he learned about Holden Carver either. So we end with the knowledge that this Holden Carver character, who is only a minor character in Point Blank, is permanently trapped. And at the very end of Point Blank, Grifter is about to begin his investigation again because he doesn't remember his solution to the investigation before.
Right, which, woof. So I, in the spirit of Sleeper, want to start with the last thing I read in Sleeper, which was The Afterword by Brubaker.
Okay, I don't think I got that afterward because I was reading it. I was reading the second season of Sleeper as individual issues, so to speak.
Right.
So what does he say in his afterword?
Basically, in his afterword, he says, I never thought this was really going to happen. And so he did Point Blank, and that, did all right. And then he pitched and he got to do Sleeper, which he wasn't planning on. So he kind of had to make up ground when he did that, spinning out. And then the second season wasn't supposed to happen, but because Sleeper was such a sleeper hit, it really caught him off guard. So what he decided to do, and we haven't talked about it yet, but was to focus on the relationship between Conductor or Holden.
Is Holden called Conductor? I never even picked that up.
I think it's mentioned once at the beginning, and he doesn't take to the superhero grandeur, so it kind of gets cut off. But he has this relationship with Miss Misery that gets explored. And
explored even more, yes.
And that's what he wanted to focus on.
So what season 1 of Sleeper focuses on is the fact that Holden Carver, or Conductor, realizes he's trapped in the role of a supervillain because no one on the good guy side now knows he's a good guy. So if he tried to get out of it, I guess he would just be killed as a bad guy. Right? He can't be brought in from the cold, brought back into the warmth of the agency. It's all about kind of his attempts to survive while hoping something good will happen, I guess. And then when he kind of finally gives up at the end of season 1 is when and kind of gets convinced by Tao, who realizes he was a sleeper agent. He gets convinced by Tao to now really join Tao. And right after that happens, that's when John Lynch, the one person who could have saved him, comes out of his coma. And that's the end of Sleeper season 1. So that's how they originally meant to end it.
Right. And all of this just circles around the idea of him being a sleeper agent and going on these missions that would go against what I guess his values would actually be, though it seems like he doesn't really have any values and it's just about the mission. And I saw somewhere in a review that they were saying that Holden pushes the idea of what a hero is supposed to be and whatnot, which I found odd because he never hits me as a hero. He never hits me as anyone with any real morals or limits. It's
they kind of keep throwing out the idea, meaning Ed Brubaker, keeps throwing out the idea that Holden, while he feels bitter about it, has decided, and he's been doing this even before he became a sleeper agent, doing immoral acts for the ultimate good that supposedly is represented by the organization he works for is somehow worth it. But there's always a hint that he's just kind of addicted to this lifestyle too, or something like that.
Right. Like
it's hard to really ever put your finger on it.
Like he's gone too far and he can't come back or something. It's always a little muddy to me. And that's the thing, is ultimately the series, we were talking about all these machinations of the plot as they go through and the being the sleeper of the agent. But the truth is, it seems like it ultimately doesn't matter. And they're trying to explore Holden. But there's not much depth there. He just seems kind of broken. There's no redeeming qualities, really. He's just doing what he's doing. And because he doesn't really have connection, like there are a few connections to his old life, his ex-wife, a couple friends, but that's it.
Yeah, they don't present much of a life that he could go back to. Although that's also supposed to be his tragedy, that in becoming this sleeper agent, he had to destroy what life he did have, which was, I think he was engaged rather than married. I'm not sure.
Right.
But so he had to convince the woman he loved that he was actually a villain, and she was an agent of IO, supposedly one of the good guys. So he had to convince her, along with everyone else, of his evilness. And then later, can't even remember if it was season 1 or season 2. We have several times where he has the opportunity to have her redeem him in a sense, and then he keeps rejecting her anyway. I guess in the noble sense, I don't deserve you anymore. I've become slime or something like that.
Right. So he basically just hates himself, and he's willing to wallow in it.
Right. And his lover is this person, one of the top criminals named Miss Misery, who becomes sick if she does good things, and the more bad things she does, from smoking to beating people up to betraying them, the more powerful she becomes.
So she becomes this odd character where it's one of those weird superpower ideas where she has to be so bad that, like, in order for her to be in a relationship, she can't be, and he understands that. Right. So she's constantly out with other people trying to hurt him. Yeah.
There's a weird psychology to all of this. There's somehow something romantic about being awful. There's supposed to be a romance of negativity here. The abused, abrasive woman who abuses you, and you, in some sense, abuse her, and your cycle of abuse has somehow got a romantic tinge to it.
Well, because he feels bad about himself, so by her making him feel bad, he feels like he deserves it, so it works for him.
Right. And at times she loves him, and then she starts getting sick.
Yeah.
So it's really, I think, aspects of this that I like. It's just the execution was tedious.
Right. There was a whole play where, because she's working for Tao, that he kind of reveals that he's a sleeper agent. They all kind of, like, it's this open secret, but he's planning with her to, like, get his comeuppance and kind of pull himself out of being a sleeper agent by doing the right thing ultimately. And then she ultimately betrays him, and it's supposed to be they play it like it's supposed to be the shocker. I'm like, right. Of course she betrayed him.
Well, but there was a betrayal within a betrayal within a betrayal, because she faked a betrayal against him, which was really all part of their plan to betray both Tao and Lynch. And then at the last, so they or appeared to betray him, but that was part of their plan. They betray Tao and they betray Lynch, and then she betrays him again, and along comes his ex-fiancée, who shoots her just before she's about to kill Holden Carver. We're probably confusing our listeners, but just as she's about to kill Holden Carver, I'm now giving away the real end, or very close to the end of the story. And then he just instinctively, apparently, before seeing who she is, kills the fiancée or the ex-fiancée who just saved him. Although one senses it's because he, despite all the betrayals, had such a romantic feeling about Miss Misery that he wanted to kill anyone who killed her, even as she was about to kill him. And he killed the only other woman who ever loved him.
Right, which I don't know. I must have tuned out or something, because I lost the thread at some point, to be honest. And I think that was my problem with this book. By the time they got to any meat on the bones for anything beyond the relationships between people, it felt somewhat insignificant, and it was part of this larger bit of Wildstorm, which I was just learning was actually where the book was the whole time, and I didn't know, and it just...
But the whole point of all of these, as more clearly illustrated by the Point Blank one, is to do a mindfuck, is to take you around in all these loops, and it's this, it's that, no, it's not. You're back to the beginning, or you're back to a situation that stinks, no matter how hard you try to make things better. And no matter, there's no redemption, things are only getting worse. It's like the ultimate entropy of the soul or something.
Right. And so, I don't know, we dance around a lot of seedy characters and situations, and it just ultimately feels off, because we have this relationship with Miss Misery, we have everyone at these bars. Holden isn't willing to talk about his superhero name, and doesn't really want to deal with anyone. The whole thing to me felt like what you think is cool when you're 16 or something. Like, it's a bunch of quote unquote mature themes done in the most
Right.
immature, like most edgy kind of way, and ultimately wasn't that substantive or interesting because with nobody having redeeming qualities or anything, it ultimately just feels like the best thing that could have been done was for them all to be blown up in their own, saddle of misery and to just move on.
Well, maybe you're too healthy psychologically for this book. But at some point, you kind of gave me an out as we were starting to read this. Like, okay, we could just dump this and do something else. But I was like, no, I want to keep reading. So for me, there was something about this that even though it never attained a high quality, a high level, it was somehow fascinating. I like the idea of this this loop of moral turpitude and these sort of layers of deception and everything like that. I feel like there's potentially good stuff in all of this. I also, I guess, maybe I can't credit Brubaker for it, but I liked the powers. Like we haven't said our main guy, Holden Carver, some alien artifact has attached itself to his nervous system, and he can't feel pain no matter what. Although it seems like he feels psychological pain, but he often says he can't feel that either.
Right, physical pain he can't.
He definitely can't feel physical pain, but if he gets shot or beaten, he can take the pain that he didn't feel and touch someone and put that pain onto them. And I thought that was a really cool power.
He's like Bishop, but with pain.
And and Ms. Misery was kind of a cool explanation for a villain.
Yeah.
The fact that she, in the end, didn't want to get rid of her power, she wanted to be what she was.
Right.
Was kind of also that circle of corruption that you can't get out of. Even when you have a chance to get out, you can no longer get out. Which, again, is kind of a 16-year-old idea of romance, too.
Right. And I want to back up real quick.
Yeah,
for those who don't know, turpitude means depravity or wickedness. Formal noun. That was a new one on me, so there you go.
Sorry about that.
Oh no, it's good.
I was just commenting to my daughter that maybe I have too big of a vocabulary and it actually keeps me from communicating with people.
I've had that pointed out to me at the same time, so it's all good. New words are good. I found it fascinating that you dug this book because normally this is the sort of thing that I gravitate more to, and you kind of slide off of.
I had a love-hate relationship with it.
Well, that sounds about right.
I think knowing how much I like what these people did later on made this fascinating because I feel like they were exploring a lot of the stuff they later explored much better. And I had this sense, this whole talking about a plot that goes around in a circle, I feel like they keep circling similar themes and plots until they finally start getting them right. And in my reading, I've been reading more criminal because I came to criminal kind of late. So I've been reading some of the stuff I missed. And the earlier criminal isn't as good as the later criminal, it seems to me. Although I still haven't read it all. I'd love to do a podcast on that. But my impression is that a lot of these themes are re-explored in different ways. There's one, I think the second volume of Criminal, a guy goes undercover in his brother's old gang and ends up in kind of a sadistic sexual relationship with his brother's old lover.
Right.
And there's a lot of similarities there to Sleeper. But the arrow of the plot keeps moving forward.
Right. Well, I think the complication of the whole Wildstorm thing is a weakness for this book. I feel like the need for superheroes kind of makes it a weakness too, because you could tell they just want to have their trench coats and guns and liquor. They don't really want all this other stuff. And I feel as if, Sleeper's ultimately held back and they got to do more they wanted to do later in Criminal. Also, they also worked on a book called Incognito that was, or at least Brubaker did.
No, they both did, I think.
Yeah. That was noir superhero stuff that I think was a stronger entry overall.
But I wouldn't say I don't feel they were held back by Wildstorm. I mean, they might have been. But my feeling as a reader is they were held back by their own inability at this stage in their career to do what they were striving to do. They're reaching for this kind of story. I mean, even like what's that story about that they did recently about Hollywood? That ends up in kind of a circle where nothing gets resolved at the end. The crime gets solved, but
they've done so many. It's kind of crazy.
Right.
And I want to clarify, because I think I could easily see what I said being somewhat misinterpreted. I don't mean like an editorial mandate, or normally when we talk about comics like that. I just feel like they're trying to do so much and they had to kind of fit it in this sandbox that already existed. And they're trying to do their own thing with these characters. And it just were too many layers for a book that I was already trying to be overly complicated. And so by being able to maybe step away from that, have a book where you just have humans doing their own messed up things, allowed their ideas and art to sing in a way that worked a lot better. It's kind of funny to me seeing it now, like this partnership came out of this book that's kind of a hot mess.
But it was popular at the time, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, because it kind of feels, to me, my conclusion is they were very lucky to get to practice while being paid this was like a warm-up for the good work they were eventually going to do.
Right.
Like even the artwork, I love Sean Phillips' artwork, but it's not nearly as good here as it was later. And I often found it hard to tell the difference between one character and another if they weren't properly tagged. Like that guy Lynch looked different all the time. You had to see the scars on one side of his face to be sure it was him sometimes. And even the hero Holden Carver sometimes was hard to pick out from a crowd.
Right.
Times.
And while there were some
and all women look alike. His fiancée and his evil girlfriend both kind of look the same.
When they were fighting, I couldn't make heads or tails of that scene because they looked the same.
Yeah. So the artist has really refined his technique, and he's added a lot more. Like he uses a similar layout over and over and over again in Sleeper, which he's moved on from that, and he's simplified in a way things and made them more innovative in another way. Okay, we're being interrupted for a moment. Sorry.
Oh, hi. I didn't see you there.
Guys, keep it down. I'm trying to talk here.
My name is George Hanna. I was one of the hosts of the George and Tony Entertainment Show, a podcast you probably never heard of. I have a new project scheduled to start this spring, and I hope you'll give it a listen. More importantly, though, I, along with my co-hosts, will be participating in Live Stream for the Cure this year. We hope you'll help fight cancer by listening to this podcasting telethon hosted by the Epic Film Guys, May 17th through the 19th, 2019, and contributing to the cause. For more information, check out livestreamforthecure.com. This promo is under construction, so keep your ears open for updates on my new project. And oh yeah, cancer!
I think I was babbling on something about the artwork.
You were talking about Phillips' art.
Yeah, so like his art has become, you can see it's the same artist, but it's become refined and refined over and over again from doing these kind of noir stories, I think. And I think the same with Brubaker's technique, because I feel like in all of his books involve a lot of these captions that sort of tell you what the person's thinking, or some kind of narration that's very close to the character, and then them kind of wandering around as they're thinking about things through, like in Kill or Be Killed, a lot of scenes of him wandering the streets of New York between the action scenes or the emotional relationship scenes.
Yeah.
But here there's just way too much. Did you get that sense of people just wandering around the city all the time?
Yeah, there's a lot of just kind of wanderlust and depravity, more so than the intricate web.
And there was even more of that in the earlier Point Blank. I mean, literally 5 issues of Grifter just wandering from bar to bar, it seemed like.
That's goofy.
But that's like the film noir thing, right? You're wandering around looking for clues by going to shady nightclubs or something.
Yeah, I guess.
And what did you think of the very end, where there's an alien who has been held by IO, by the good guys, for whatever reasons they're holding him, but one of the things the alien can do is supposedly remove the alien technology from Carver's body. although they imply that that's actually a lie they said to Carver. But then the alien goes ahead and tries to remove it from him, and he's left in a coma where he's in a fantasy world, which I don't know if they gave that to him as like a gift.
Right. And I think that's maybe the weakest part of the storytelling overall in this book, is there's so much subterfuge and so much kind of twisting that by the time things ultimately happen or seem to happen, the intents or reasoning behind it feel kind of lost.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why some of their later work works better when it's at least vaguely more grounded, even if you're dealing with Cthulhu cults or some amount of mysticism, is that the rules get to be set with all these crazy superpowers that go from like, you know, people's intentions with misery of doing the bad thing, which is somewhat subjective regardless, or like being a battery for pain. Like the alien that allows this ability or not, whether or not he can take it or not, is that intended? Is it not? Does it matter? And by the time you're done with it, it's like, well, that's where we ended. So what does it mean? I don't know.
But in 24 issues, I felt like I should learn more about these things. We spent a lot of time on it. I want to, it was interesting, tantalizing bits about the character Tao, whose motivation just seems to be revenge on the entire world. He just wants to bring everything down, supposedly to maybe make things better, and because he sees the corruptness of everything. All that would be interesting to follow up on, but they don't really. They just rip out Tao's tongue at the end. And leave him supposedly powerless if his powers really come from his tongue.
That was another thing that grabbed me. Tao is, far as I could tell, just another white guy. Holden's a white guy. Miss Misery's a white guy. My point being is, for all the talk of diversity and whatnot, here's a book where you have a guy named Tao who's not Asian by any means, and it's supposed to be this globe-trotting adventure. There's all this stuff.
Tao might be Asian. It's hard to tell the way they've drawn him.
All right, well, fair enough.
But was he Asian? What was he in the original Wildstorm stories that he appeared in? I don't know.
I remember reading him a bit in Wildcats, and I just can't remember to place it. But like, I don't know. It just felt like we're dealing with all these characters. It's just a bunch of white people. Thinking about it with, things need to have more diversity now. This felt like a book that definitely could have used it. Like, having some perspective would have helped it, I think.
It could have. However, it's not surprising that 20 years ago no one was thinking about that. You would just put in the occasional slightly ethnic character off to the side somewhere, and that people used to feel that was them doing their due diligence.
I guess.
And it's all based on whatever already was in the Wildstorm universe. I think Tao Tao is a person created in a laboratory, but in the vagueness of I'm searching for pictures of him, but there are moments where I wondered if he was supposed to be like a mix of races.
I guess test tube babies don't get a lot of representations. There you go.
Anyway, I don't think that anyone was thinking about representation when they were doing this.
Fair enough. Not that any of these characters would be a positive role model for anyone anyways.
I mean, everyone was blown away that there was one gay person in the Wildstorm universe, right? That was
There was two, because they were a couple.
Oh, that's true. There was two. I always forget about
Apollo.
Apollo. I always think about Midnighter.
Well, he was the cool one.
Yeah, so Batman. There were two gay people, and that was like a big deal.
There's other gay characters in Wildstorm overall, but maybe not memorable ones.
As I flip around, like another thing he just tosses in here is this group of rich beyond rich people who control the world. An Illuminati situation. Yeah, and they're just a bunch of really rich people whose families, for thousands and thousands of years, have somehow controlled the world. They never show how. And that group is multinational. And one of the main characters that we deal with there is what do they call it? The Queen of Egypt or something like that.
That's true. And hey, they just pay to have their kids going to college and it's all good.
Who knows? Maybe someday you'll be rich enough to bribe your son's way into college.
Here can hope.
Yeah, I'm looking at this picture of Tao. He could be Asian, but it really doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be, could not be.
He's a blank. He's a cipher, really.
That's an interesting point. People who are more subtly ethnic, I guess. That's not a good way to phrase it. With comics, it'd be hard to tell.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this isn't the area to dwell on. It's something that hit me while reading this book.
Yeah, I guess I just don't even think about that kind of thing mostly when I'm reading any older comic or seeing an older movie, right? I mean, I guess there was a point in the 90s where they started having the Black Buddy or something.
I mean, there were some books that were doing better, but it's give or take for sure. I don't know.
But you're right. I mean, their image, it looks like the typical mafia movie or something in a way. Although they're not portrayed as Italian, and they aren't. But I mean, just a bunch of white guys in leather jackets and suits, rumpled suits, wandering about.
Right.
It kind of tickled my fancy, twisting the world of superheroes into the world of gangsters and espionage. That's kind of fun, and I don't know how much of that comes out of Wildstorm and how much Brubaker forced it into that. But I thought that was kind of a neat way, to take superpowered people as just like these people who exist outside of the law, the way both spies do and criminals do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true, but I'm trying to remember the exact year, but I feel like around this time you had someone like that Bendis stuff coming up, you had Brubaker doing this. I feel like that was something that was kind of popping off and kind of a movement at the time with...
Well, Bendis definitely brought that.
Yeah.
With Powers. When did Powers come out? Probably a few years before this, I'm guessing.
Can't remember, and I was thinking more Alias, which might have been a little bit after.
Oh,
but
Alias might have been a little, yeah. Yeah, so you're right. That was kind of a thing at the time.
Yeah, not too far along, you have the Hood with Parker and all that. Like, we were getting into that, I don't know, post-80s grit, which needed to have a different layer to it because people are getting sick of Watchmen, or the Watchmen influence.
Well, and this is so different than the 90s, even though it comes very shortly after the 90s. The 90s superhero, so that may have been part of why it got attention, is taking this world that, a few years before had been just giant punches and double-page spreads, and suddenly making it into lots of small, shadowy panels with people who don't know what their moral compass is at all. So it might have had a certain kind of novelty at the time that it doesn't to us at the moment.
Well, and what's interesting about that was this was novel at the time. And this book, I mean, not solo, but helped kick off kind of a new era of books. I mean, what Brubaker and Phillips have done going forward and many other books. And I think it's actually maybe a testament to a lot of the stuff that's come since that this is better. Or I mean, that what's come later has been better. And that this, you can see the seeds of what it was doing, but there's a lot of growth to be made. And so many, I think you could point to so many image books that, kind of took some pages from this. And it kind of makes me happy that there's a lot of room to grow in a lot of ways, because we got so much from it. Whereas if this was such a definitive work, kind of right out the gate, it might have been more singular and we wouldn't have gotten as much.
Right. Or it might have been like what you experience after reading Watchmen, where everything else, not everything else, but you can see a lot of other writers trying to do the same thing, but not doing it as well. Instead, we get to see this same thing become better, as you're saying. In a way, it's a better long-term deal for us than, one singular standout masterpiece that everything else flounders trying to touch.
Yeah. Oof.
We've turned it into a positive.
Yeah. Man, that's such a good ending point. I don't. Was there
Yeah.
anything else in this book you wanted to hit on?
It makes me enjoy their later work more in a weird way, but also see them as more human. See that they had to really work their way up to their best work. That's
Yeah.
the kind of inspiring. You can do a lot of so-so versions of things. If you keep trying, you'll get better.
There is something endearing to that, right? Like the first volumes of the books I'm thinking of are like Strangers in Paradise or Cerebus or the early Ninja Turtles or stuff like that. The self-published stuff so early. Yeah, the Growing Pains or like
Cerebus particularly stands out as, a few years after he began, he was in such a different place. And
right.
then, I mean, I don't want to follow him all the way to the end, I guess, but up to a point, it was an amazing metamorphosis and growth by doing.
Well, and in Cerebus, you can watch that art grow issue by issue until you get to
Right.
about the third volume where he kind of lands on a style and carries that
That's a good
forward.
point. Yeah. Yeah.
And those volumes are phone books, not volumes the way we think about them.
Right.
So
Right. We're talking 75 issues or 100 issues before he lands on that style. Excuse me.
is it that far? I don't know about that, but close. Sorry, I was just looking at him like there's a lot of volumes. There's only 300 issues, but yeah, only 300 issues.
So I should apologize to anyone in our audience who was actually paying attention or cares that we said our next show was going to be on the spirit. But I think I have a bit of a block on doing a show on the spirit.
A block?
Like I'm a little uneasy about doing it.
Why?
Diving in and the two of us analyzing it. So part of me wants to find just the right stories for us to talk about.
Okay.
Which is easier said than done. But also, like, if you find a lot of flaws with the spirit, and you may well, and I agree with you, I'll be kind of sad. I like having my delusion of greatness of my memories of the spirit.
I've been reading some. I haven't finished that one magazine that I pointed out we both had. And you said you wanted me to read some more, so I
Right.
wasn't.
Do you feel like you'd be willing to read some more at this point, or do you feel
yeah.
like you've kind of had enough?
I mean,
Because we could just discuss that magazine. It's not an unreasonable
we can
choice.
if you want to.
But
If you want to dig in on something else, my thing is like I'm reading it, but I feel like I almost do want to read more because it feels like I'm only getting a moment in time. And if we're going to talk about the spirit, I feel like I need a little bit more breath.
yeah.
And it reads so different than anything I've read before that it might be good for me to get a little bit more because
Yeah.
it's not the way comics are done now.
No. But I don't know. I personally see a lot of its influences despite that. Maybe not narratively so much as artistically. But
I'm seeing a lack of its influence anymore, which is actually something I want to talk about. There's a number of aspects that I've been pouring into and seeing Will Eisner doing what he does versus kind of the way comics are now. Yeah, there's some things to talk about where I think comics could do well to reach back.
Well, I agree there. And there's a whole bunch of, actually that circles in with some thoughts I've had in general about the spirit and our discussion on Conan and some other things and some Silver Age comics that I read that make me think how the whole approach to serialized characters has shifted.
Yeah.
And in some ways perhaps hurt them.
I think it's dramatically for the worse overall. The more I read of some of the older stuff, the more I look at some modern comics and it feels thin.
Yeah, but there's also, there's counters to both. I mean,
Sure.
Stuff. I wouldn't want to let go of everything. I wouldn't want to go back to 1965 or something.
I don't want to go back to 1965, but I want there to be a book that tries to.
Savage Dragon?
Savage Dragon is not that book. That book is reaching all the way back to 1992 is my best guesstimate.
Well, anyway, I guess that's a teaser for a future conversation. I want to say congratulations to Matt for becoming a father.
Oh, thank you.
There's a new superpower for you, and you're looking very alert and on top of things. So I guess, I thought at first fatherhood would mean the end of podcasting, but I guess not. So that's good news.
Yeah, got it dialed in.
How old is your son now? A month?
A month, yeah. Not quite reading Conan yet.
So another reason not to stay dead, because you have a son to support and a wife to keep sane. So it was a great conversation. We'll be back soon, I hope.